welcome back to my channel. So today I am going to actually discuss Darlie Routier. Vicky Holland emailed me and recommended this case, which, to be honest, I never even heard of it until she recommended it. And I'm like, well, let me check it out. And wow, I'm glad she did, because I'm definitely interested, and there's definitely some crazy kind of things. There's like there's definitely a good debate going on, like people that don't think she did it, people that do think she did it. I just started kind of studying this case a couple weeks ago, so right now, I mean, my opinion could definitely change as more I research it, but right now I'm leaning towards I don't think she did it, but like I said, as I get deeper and deeper and further into the evidence and the more of the research and analyzation, like I might end up changing my mind. I don't know, but right now I it's almost like maybe, I mean, let's put it this way, I definitely have reasonable doubt. I mean, there's definitely doubt. So I mean, aren't you innocent until proven guilty? If there's any reasonable doubt, like, you know what I'm saying? So I definitely have doubt, which makes me think, as far as our justice system goes, if there's any doubt, then she shouldn't be sitting on death row right now, So I don't know. It's crazy. She was she's actually the first woman placed on death row in Texas. So, and there's 3,000 people on death row now in the US, right? But every year 5 of them are found innocent and set free. So, and now with like technology and the advances we made in like how we could test for DNA, they're bringing up these old cases and realizing that 5 people a year have been sitting there for probably half their life or so many years for a crime they didn't commit. And that's on death row, fearing every day, not knowing when, is going to be your turn. That's the scariest thing, like not knowing every day, like not knowing, like, they make you wait like 10, 20 years, but you still never know every day. Is today going to be my day? Is today going to, like, that would be crazy. And for like that many people to be innocent, so that's awesome though that they were actually finding out and setting these people free. And, she might be one of them. So I think, if I have this date right, February 4th, 97 is when the verdict, was in, and when they actually, gave her sentence. So she's been on death row for, let's see, in prison on death row for 22 years. 22 years. So she was actually 26 years old when they sentenced her to death. Wow, that's so young. Oh my, can you imagine? And now she's 49, I believe. It's just, I can't even imagine. I really can't. Especially if she really didn't do it, Okay, now she's 49, so wow. Can you imagine? Especially if she's innocent. Which, I mean, we don't know, but like, maybe she is guilty. I don't know, but what if she is innocent and she spent 22 years and maybe longer, and maybe, actually is going to be executed if they don't end up freeing her. I know she's tried to get like appeals and stuff, and they've been rejected, and maybe to have a mistrial or a new trial. I mean, they're still working on it. I think they're still waiting to get like 12 items, I think, DNA tested. So I'm kind of interested to see what they find out, which I'll tell you some of the evidence that they're testing. But let me just give you kind of a rundown of what happened for those of you that maybe aren't familiar with the case, you know. So it was a 1996 murder, okay, June 6th, 1996, in Rowlett, Texas, 5801 Eagle Drive. At 2:30 a.m., a 911 call, which was her. He's screaming and, you know, pleading like, hurry up, come. And, you know, I listened to that 911 call, and I think she sounded sincere. Like, it sounded like she was truly, like, shocked and scared and, like, petrified and, like, oh my God, you gotta come. And I heard her saying, like, hold on, baby.
What is your emergency? Ma'am? What? Who did? Hang on. Hang on, ma'am. I got medical emergency. 5801 Eagle Drive. Ma'am, I'm trying to get an ambulance to you. Hang on a minute. What's going on, ma'am? Oh my God! Medical emergency 5801 Eagle Drive by 238. Prosecution the victim in Willowbrook. Attention 901 medical emergency. Maybe possible stabbing 5801 Eagle Drive by 238. Prosecution the victim in Willowbrook. Coming out 232. Stand by, car. Hey. Oh my God. You get it going for 5801 Eagle Drive. 5801 Eagle Drive. The circle people on the phone. Hold on. The child has been stabbed. Ma'am, I need you to calm down and talk to me. What? 5801 Eagle? Ma'am, listen to me. I need you to... Oh my God. Can you take the radio clip? Yes. Ma'am, I need you to talk to me. Ma'am, I can't understand you. You're going to have to slow down, calm down, and talk to me. What is going on? Somebody keep me alone. Sleeping me. My little boys are sleeping downstairs. Stand up, baby. Stand there. Look up. I was crying. We ran out to the garage. They're not dead. My daughters are dying. They're dead. Oh, my God. Down the telephone. Oh, my God. Just that down one. Hold on, honey. Hold on. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Ma'am, who's there with you? Ma'am. What? Is there anybody in the house besides you and your children? My husband, he's just right downstairs. He's helping me, but he's dying. Oh, my God. Okay. How many little boys? Is it 2 boys? Okay, listen to me. Calm down. Go ahead. 5801 Eagle Drive. 5801 Eagle Drive. Going to be a stabbing. When are they going to be here? Ma'am, they're on their way. Oh my God. Ma'am, how old are your boys? What? How old are your boys? No. Okay. Oh my God. eagle? Huh? That eagle? What eagle? My God, I'm sorry. Angel, you out. Oh my God. Oh my God. Why would they do this? What did he say? Why would they do this? Hey, listen, ma'am. You need to let the officers in the front door, okay? What? Ma'am? You need to let the police officers in the front door. This guy's was laying over there and I already picked it up. Okay, it's all right. It's okay. We got the press, baby. Ma'am, hang on a second. We walked in here and did it, Darren. Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, is the police officer there? Okay, go talk to him, okay? Yes, that's okay. Go talk to him, though. Okay?
Because her youngest, well, not her youngest, she has 3 sons, right? Devin and Damon, 5 and 6 years old, are the ones that were fatally stabbed. Okay. And she had a young son that was just a baby at the time. And so what happened was, so she wakes up because there's a part where she like blacks out. They call it like traumatic amnesia, you know. She said she wakes up like a Damon's like pushing her shoulder, you know, the 5-year-old. She kind of wakes up and you know, and she sees this guy with a baseball cap as an intruder, she says, you know, and it was kind, you know, it was dark, you know, but she sees this guy and she kind of gets up to go chase him or whatever, and he goes into the utility room, which is connected to the garage, and then goes out to the garage and leaves, right? Okay, so then she says she looks down and she sees blood everywhere. She walks back, you know, back in the kitchen and living room. She sees blood. She sees a bloody knife on the floor. She picks it up, puts it on the counter, right? And then she sees, you know, Devin and Damon. Devin is already, you know, pretty much gone. Damon is still alive, you know, still breathing at that moment. And so she calls 911, right? So you can listen to this 911 call. I mean, she's just, oh my God, my kid's been stabbed. You know, like, hurry up, come, you know, and you could hear her saying, hold on, Damon, hold on, baby, hold on, you know, and she's talking about there's blood everywhere, and then they asked, like, is there a weapon, or I don't know the exact words. She said, oh my God, there's a knife, you know, and then the 911 operator was like, you know, don't touch the knife, don't touch any evidence. And she's like, oh my God, I already touched the knife, I picked it up, I put it on the counter, oh my God, I shouldn't have done it. And, you know, and starts kind of like, oh, I probably, you know, got the fingerprints off, oh my God. And that was one of the things that the prosecutors said was like a telltale sign that, you know, of what guilty people do. They like try to claim that there's some way that the evidence has been tampered with and it won't show up, you know. So that was one of their, you know, arguments where, you know, she kept stressing how this knife, you know, she touched it and oh my God, she got the fingerprints off, and that was, you know, a sign that she was lying, you know, which I didn't see it that way. I don't know. I mean, I guess she should have kept the knife on the floor, but, you know, she said, you know, just out of habit, you see a knife, you just picked it up. And I mean, I guess I could see, you know, you see this knife and you just want to get it off the floor so people don't step on it. I don't know. She might not have been thinking straight. You know, look what just happened. So, but anyway, she screams and, oh, I forgot to set this up. So Darren, her husband, had her youngest son. So I guess like the youngest son, before they went to bed, she said that, you know, the youngest son was kind of, you know, crying. So Darren just said, oh, I'll take him upstairs and sleep. And Darlie and Devin and Damien slept, you know, in the living room, or Darlie slept on the couch and the boys slept on the floor. Okay, so when, you know, Darren said he heard Darlie just scream, so he came running down, you know, when this all happened. So, and he said, I guess she didn't even realize she was cut and bleeding, because I guess he told her, wow, you're bleeding, you're cut. And she's like, what? So she had a slit across her neck. Her arms were all black and blue. I mean, it was like the bruises like covered her whole arms. And she had cuts, slits. I'm trying to think where they exactly were. I want to study them a little more in depth and end up showing you guys pictures. I think, yeah, they were like right there. So it almost makes sense, kind of defensive wounds, if somebody's trying to, stab her and she puts her arm up, hit, and she had them on both sides. So it kind of makes sense. And kind of makes sense, reasons why they're like, her story changes or she doesn't remember, well, yeah, because she don't even remember the altercation or the fight or the attack, I should say. Like how she got those bruised arms, the cuts, the slit on her neck, the stab wounds on her arms and stuff. Like she don't even remember that. So, they're claiming she's just lying or whatever. But like, if she does have some kind of traumatic amnesia, or she lost blood, it's just so traumatic when the attack happened, and she actually passed out or kind of blacked out, forgot, and then the next time she remembers coming to is when Damon's like pushing on her shoulder. And that's when she kind of wakes up and gets up, sees the guy, chases him out, and then calls 911. So maybe she blacked out, like, when the attacker attacked her, stabbed her. She blacks out, kind of loses consciousness. He kills the two kids, and then Damon goes up, pushes her, and she kind of like, wakes back up, and then all of a sudden she's got a cut, she's got black and blue, she don't even remember what happened. So it's very possible that, that could have happened, So she goes to the hospital. She almost died. They said it was like a millimeter away from a carotid artery, where if they would, it like nicked it, but it didn't cut through. If it would have cut it, she would have bled to death. So she goes to the hospital, gets treated, comes out. And then there's this, they call it the silly string video, that it was one of their big arguments and one of their big, the prosecution's big, pieces of evidence that, kind of convinced the jury. Because I guess they showed this video quite a few times. There's this video, you could look it up on YouTube or whatever, where it was 8 days, okay, after the crime. So after she got out of the hospital, and it was, they already had like the invitation sent out for Devin's birthday, so they still celebrated it. 8 days after the crime, they celebrated at the gravesite, okay, on the son's birthday, and they sprayed silly string, right? So, and it shows like, Darlie all laughing and having fun. Happy birthday, dear
Devin. If you knew Devin and Damon, you would know that they're up in heaven, and they're up there having the biggest birthday party that we could ever imagine. And they wouldn't want us to be down here being sad. Even though our hearts are breaking, I know that Devin and Damon would want us to be happy.
Which, she says, I was celebrating their life. They love silly string. What's wrong with that? What do they say? Nobody's ever been, put on death row for a can of silly string, so, but they didn't show, they didn't choose to show the first part of that video where she was kind of like looking sad and, you know, hugging her sister, and, you know, they just showed that one part, and they claimed it was because they didn't get permission or something.
But Charlie says the jurors kept playing this tape and challenging his notion that an innocent woman could act this way.
She wasn't grieving, spraying the city string and gnawing on that chewing gum.
What the jury didn't see was this surveillance video of Darlie. Police had secretly taped the gravesite for hours that day. There was weeping, praying, preaching.
Father made this day a birthday, a day of rejoicing.
There was Darlie's sister. The silly string was her idea. The dead boys had loved it.
I got you some snaps with some silly string, okay?
But this video was not okay. There were questions about its legality. And when the trial judge raised them, there was a heated argument in the courtroom.
The two police officers pled the Fifth Amendment.
Stephen Cooper is one of Darlie's new attorneys. Wait a minute, you're saying that the police officers...
Lead investigator in this case pled the Fifth Amendment and refused...
About the videotape that the police department had made?
Correct.
Why did he do that?
He was persuaded that he was exposed to criminal prosecution for his acts.
And the video was never entered into evidence. The police were not charged. So the sad Darlie was never seen by the jury, and the bad Darlie got big play.
He wanted to be 7. I did the only thing I knew to do to honor him and give him those wishes because he wasn't here anymore. But how do you know what you're going to do when you lose 2 children? How do you know how you're going to act? And who's to say there's a rule book to grieving? Who's to say if you don't follow these guidelines, that makes you a bad parent or that makes you a murderer?
Less than 2 weeks, okay, after the murders, she was arrested, right? So they say, like, the prosecution kind of focused on her character, like she was materialistic, she was self-centered, pampered wife, distraught because husband's computer business wasn't making enough money to pay the bills, 2 months behind on mortgage, behind on credit cards. So, you know, right off the bat, and they also say, like, 20 minutes onto the scene, they thought Darlie was guilty, the investigators. So, you know, Darlie's defense is saying, so of course they're going to look at all the evidence and kind of form it and mold it to that scenario of Darlie being guilty. So everything they look at, they're kind of, you know, so it's kind of biased. It definitely is. If they already had it in their mind 20 minutes, which isn't long enough to, you know what I'm saying, to really do an investigation, and they already had it, their mind made up, then that evidence is going to be biased. It really is. So I understand, you know, where the defense is coming from on that. So another thing, you know, the defense, you know, that the prosecution, I should say, you know, was going on is, I guess they said there was blood all on the sink, cleanup. Like, it looked like somebody that was bleeding kind of like was leaning over the sink because there was dripped blood right there. And then the sink, there was like DNA where they shined, what is that light, where they could find the DNA, and it was all blue. Like, there was DNA all over it, like somebody had cleaned up. You know, my theory is maybe she did wash her hands or wash up. You know, in some part of her amnesia, she had blood all over her. Maybe she did actually run the water and wash and didn't even, you know, didn't remember that part. But just to wash the blood before she even realized what was going on. You never know. I mean, that could explain it and make, you know, what, maybe it was just an innocent thing. I don't know. They said that, and there was a bloody sock in the alley, that the blood matched the boys, right? So the prosecution is trying to say that in the middle of the night, you know, after she, you know, stabs the boys, cut herself, because the sock had both the boys' blood on it. She took that sock, ran it down to the alley, put it in the alley, and ran back. And like she was saying, like, why would she risk doing that? You know, the neighbors could have seen her, you know, it doesn't make sense. It's kind of weird. I don't see somebody doing that, you know? So, yeah, so they, you know, 2 weeks after they arrest her, right? Okay, so they only tried her for Damon's death, for Damon's murder. So, you know, she got the death penalty for Damon, so she was never tried for Devon's yet. Which she said, you know, if she does get a new trial, she said, you know, if they find her innocent for Damon, you know, they're not gonna be able to find her guilty back for Devon, because somebody asked, well, aren't you afraid that then they might, you know, they find you innocent for Damon, then they might try you for Devon's murder? But then if she's innocent for Damon, then chances are, like, how are they gonna make her guilty for Devon's? You know what I'm saying? So, unless if they could come up with it, there's 2 people and she killed one and somebody else killed the other, which I don't know, it's probably highly unlikely. So they have Stephen Cooper has been, and he's a appellate attorney. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but he's been working on the case for 19 years. So hopefully he'll be able to get this appeal going and get a new trial. And the prosecution are saying they still stand by their word. They're saying they still say she absolutely killed them. They're absolutely certain, and they stand by it. Some of the prosecution's arguments is like she had postpartum depression after the birth of her 3rd son, okay? And she had this journal entry that was written just 1 month before the killings, where it addressed her 3 sons and it says, "Forgive me for what I'm about to do, contemplating suicide." So they say, you know, they think she killed her boys in an attempt to maintain her extravagant lifestyle. The jury was made up of 7 women and 5 men. So on January 6th of 97 is when they heard the opening arguments. This is one of the big, also, besides that silly string video, this was another big piece of evidence that, you know, probably was one of their key pieces of evidence. There was a testimony from a forensic expert, right, that told the jury that fragments from the garage window screen, which had been cut, were found on a second knife in the Routier kitchen. And the knife didn't have any blood on the knife. So it's like whoever used that knife to cut the garage would have had to do it before they killed, you know, before they took the other knife and killed anybody. So the prosecutors believed at some point Darlie cut the garage window screen with that second knife, and then after stabbing her sons with the other knife, she ran down the alley to plant the bloody sock, right, raced back home, slit her own throat, finished staging the crime scene, and called 911. That's the prosecution's argument. But the most devastating evidence against Darlie was the infamous silly string video. That's what, I know I keep repeating myself, but I have that written down again. But that was like a big piece of evidence. Defense argues that Darlie could not have had the presence of mind to stage the crime scene. So Darlie says, if I had done this, why would I risk running down an alley to drop off a piece of evidence when anybody could see me running down there? Defense says there were no witnesses, no confession, and no motive. Then, against the advice of her lawyers, Darlie took the stand. Darlie says, I needed to stand up and be heard. In an interview afterwards, that's what she said. I needed to stand up and be heard. But she withered under the cross-examination by prosecutor Toby Shook. She claimed to have amnesia. The amnesia was very convenient if she needed to explain a piece of circumstantial evidence. She'd come up with a new story. She'd have a memory of it. So they're saying, you know, basically they think she was lying about the whole amnesia and just kind of made it fit with the, you know, her defense theory, you know. The trial lasted nearly 5 weeks. The case went to the jury on Friday, January 31st. Darlie's family waited and hoped. At noon the following day came the announcement. A verdict had been reached. Darlie says it was like being hit by a ton of bricks. She was sentenced to death for a capital murder of her son Damon, 5 years old. Barbara Davis, author of a book, Precious Angels, just weeks after her book was published, she got a phone call from a source asking her to meet with him. And Barbara said why she did it. And he said, "Not after you see what I have to show you." And she said, "Within 10 minutes I was in tears. I was sick to my stomach because I knew we got it wrong. She didn't do it." First thing I saw were photographs that weren't presented to the jury. Photos of Darlie's bruises and injuries. The photos show a woman who fought for her life. Massive bruises on both of her hands. Bruises she couldn't have put on herself, in places she couldn't reach. Fingerprints of someone dug their nails into her while they were trying to hold her down. And then there was a tape that same day of the famous silly string video that before the silly string incident took place, they did have a memorial service for their boys. But because legal concerns about the camera, the tape was never shown to the jurors. But yet they showed the silly string part of the tape, but they wouldn't show the first part where, you know, she did look sad and they did have a memorial. So Darlie's family put out a desperate call for help. Brian Pardo, Waco tax millionaire, spent his own money before to defend another death row inmate. Okay, so now I don't know if her defense are trying to maybe build a case against Darren, but there's some stuff coming out about Darren, her husband. That Darren had a $300,000 insurance claim on Darlie. I don't know. In July 2001, Cooper, you know, her attorney, one of her attorneys, she's got like a team of attorneys now that are trying to help her, but he filed an appeal because Darlie deserved a new trial because her original attorney, Doug Mulder, had previously represented Darren Routier, and that constituted a conflict of interest. So, and the appeal got rejected, though. Another appeal has been filed claiming there is new evidence important to the case, which was not addressed at her 1997 trial, including a mysterious bloody fingerprint found at the crime scene. Partial print is from an adult, not children. And I'll go explain that, you know, further, and I have some more information on that here coming up. And then an affidavit was signed last summer by Darren Routier admitting 3 months before the murders he was looking for someone to burglarize his home for insurance scam. In the same affidavit, Darren said the night of the murders, Darlie asked for separation. So there's a new witness. It's anonymous, okay? She claims on the night of the murders, she saw two men walking on the side of the road around the time boys were killed. One who loosely matches description that Darlie given police. Less than an hour later, she saw a black sitting and leaving the area. And Darlie, you know, insisted back then and still insists that she's not the killer. She proclaims her innocence till this day. So lab tests did find fingerprints on the garage window that did not belong to Routier, her husband, or law enforcement, but it's unclear who left them. Much debate also centered around a bloody fingerprint on the coffee table near her son's body. Part of her appeal centered on the print belonging to an adult, not one of Routier's slain children. The print was never compared to the children's fingers because the morgue workers did not take the children's prints, which is usually standard procedure. So now they can't for sure say if it was the children's because they never took the prints, which they should have done, of the children. But there is evidence now where there's this, where do I have it here? Oh, okay. So an independent fingerprint analyst and a renowned anthropologist, Richard Jentz, has testified that the fingerprint is consistent with that of a currently unidentified adult. So they're saying it was definitely an adult, not a child. And it wasn't any of the adults, like none of the 911 responders or the police or Darlie or Darren. So that was kind of interesting. So here's some other stuff here. Okay, so there were splatters of blood on the back of Darlie's shirt. There was like upward splatters of the front of her shirt, and then there was these splatters on the back, which prosecution says she stabbed him so hard that she raised her hand up to stab them, and they splattered on her back. So they were saying like she was going like this. So when she stabbed him, then the blood came up, went like this, and that's how it got on her back. It splattered on her back like that. And they said she stabbed him so hard, and it actually was so hard that it went through the body and chipped the concrete on the floor. Man, very violent crime, very violent crime. Wow. But okay, so they're saying that, because the defense were saying, well, how can she have both boys' bloods, but her blood is also on her back? So the prosecution were arguing, well, there's no way, it's consistent with the splatters because the way that they were like sprayed, they could kind of analyze how their the splatter happens. You know what I'm saying? It was consistent with this motion, but the defense argued that because it did have both boys' blood, but it also had hers on top. So their whole theory of it being she's the one that killed him doing this, like that theory, they're saying that it contradicts it because the fact that her blood's on it. So the defense says, yeah, considering that she has her blood over top of the boy's blood on the back, like the spray, the drops or the cast off, they call it, the blood stains is actually on top of the boy's blood, that totally contradicts the state's theory that Darlie inflicted her own wounds after stabbing the boys, unless millimeter-sized blood drops from her own self-inflicted wounds later quite miraculously flew over her shoulders and landed directly on top of the boys' millimeter-sized drops of blood. So I don't know. So the defense is saying that it would be impossible considering her blood is on top for their theory. So okay, another weird thing is this is some of the evidence that the defense is trying to build, to get a new trial. Okay, so Devin's blood was not found on the knife. Okay, the oldest son's, the 6-year-old boy, only Damon's blood and her blood was found on Devin's blood. There was no blood. Devin's blood was not found on that. The one murder weapon, the only murder weapon they have at least, was that knife. And Devin's blood was not on that knife. So the defense is arguing if this was in fact the murder weapon, it's highly unlikely that none of Devin's blood remained on it. Okay? So that means either one of two things, okay? There was another murder weapon used in the attacks, or the original DNA testing was insufficient and additional testing should be conducted to correct this error. So another thing is there is in the evidence there's a canister of dried blood flakes collected from the door of the Routier home between the utility room and the garage. So they're going to retest that. That's one of the pieces of evidence that they want to retest. And I think they got approved in 2017. They requested this retesting, and then I think they got approved in 2018. So I think they're in the process of getting it all figured out. Maybe they're actually already in the process of retesting it, but they got approved. So they're going to get all this stuff retested. Or some of the stuff tested for the first time, because some of the stuff was never even tested. Okay, so there was an unidentified facial hair belonging to a non-family member that they found. So they're going to get that tested. There were 2 lifts of a blood fingerprint from a glass sofa table between the Routier family room and the kitchen. That was that fingerprint I was telling you about. The person who left the print would have had to do so while the blood was still wet. So that's what I was telling you. They had that independent finger analyst and then the anthropologist that said it was consistent with a currently unidentified adult. Okay, so there were also 2 other unidentified fingerprints that were taken from the door of the utility room leading into the garage. So it would have been the way that the intruder, would have left. So, and then there was a human limb hairs found in that tube sock, that bloody tube sock. So, I don't know. Hopefully they find out some things. That's some of the evidence that they've got approved to test, to test. So hopefully they'll get those tested and then we'll get some answers because, they have a pretty good defense. I mean, they have some good stuff. They have, possibly, that they could, if they would get a new trial. I don't know if, well, maybe you guys know. Does the new trial depend on, them testing this and then finding something that goes against, her murdering him, like that creates some kind of doubt, and then that's why they get a new trial? Or how would they be able to get a new trial is what I'm kind of wondering. From new DNA evidence, are they able to do that? So, like, if they find, like that fingerprint, isn't any of theirs, and they maybe, do they have to actually have a suspect to release her, or they just have to create some doubt again?